Kitty runs a dance show. She arrives in Finland with the 3 best dancers to perform during the Christmas holidays. On the first day of their trip, Kitty was found unconscious in the hotel room. Doctors claim that someone had poisoned her. The police interrogate all the dancers. Kira says, "My colleagues and I left the hotel early in the morning to explore the city, and Kitty stayed in the room for a conference call. I had a date with my online boyfriend, Mikkel." Pam says, "I went to the beach to sunbathe and swim. When I returned, I saw Kitty on the floor." And April says, "I went to the museum alone. Nobody wanted to join me." Who's lying? Pam. It's Christmas Eve, so it's too cold in Finland. She couldn't swim in the sea.
Oh no!
The police arrested Pam, and now Kira and April urgently need to find a new dancer for their show. They look through some profiles online and select these 3 ladies, Deborah, Sally, and Lily. But only one of them isn't fake. Can you guess who? Deborah's profile looks good, but take a closer look at the shadow in her picture. Her head is photoshopped to a different person's body, therefore, she's fake. And according to the 3rd lady's birth date, she hasn't been born yet, so they should choose Sally. April, Kira, and Sally are performing in a music hall, but first, they go to the dressing room to prepare. Suddenly, the local security guard comes in and announces, "Stay where you are! We have to recheck all the luggage! There's a runaway criminal among the actors." Here's the luggage left by 4 guys who are playing Santas. Can you spot the criminal? Santa never shaves, so the second luggage looks pretty suspicious because it has shaving cream. The remaining 3 Santas open their performance. They look absolutely identical in their costumes. After the show, they go backstage and take off their beards and hats to drink some coffee. This is Carl, Peter, and George. After the break, they put on the costumes again and go to the after party. Can you decide which one of them is Carl? Carl was mixing sugar in his coffee with his left hand. It means that he's left-handed. And this Santa signs an autograph with his left hand. Therefore, he's Carl. After work, Kira and April go to the local parade. Can you help them find a sheep among all these Santas? There it is. What about these reindeers? Can you see any bears among them? Hello? Kira and April enter a shopping mall and face 4 Santas buying gifts for their families. Meanwhile, the mall security guard receives a call from the police. A mysterious thief in a Santa suit has robbed multiple gift shops. They figured out that this mall should be next. The guard asked everybody to stay where they are. Can you help him find the criminal? It's the 3rd Santa. He's hiding a couple of crowbars in his bag. Also, his beard and mustache are different from the other Santas. Kira and April decide to throw a party in the hotel room. April decorates the room and sets up the Christmas tree. Meanwhile, Kira cooks dinner and prepares gifts for 3 people, Thomas, Sally, and Mikkel. The guests arrive and the party begins. At some point, they notice that someone has stolen all the gifts. Kira believes it must be one of the guests, so she questions everyone. Every guest makes 2 statements, 1 truth and 1 lie. Thomas says, "I wasn't in the room when it happened. I know Mikkel stole the gifts." Sally says, "Mikkel stole them. I saw it. I already have enough presents." And finally, Mikkel says, "I didn't steal the gifts." Thomas tells the truth. He wasn't in the room. Who stole the Christmas gifts? If Thomas is the thief, both of his statements would have been false, and if Mikkel is the thief, then all of Thomas's statements would have been true. Therefore, Sally stole the gifts. Frank is staying in a hotel room next to Kira. The day before Christmas Eve, she knocks on his door to borrow some toothpaste. The door is open, and Frank is lying unconscious on the floor. Later that day, doctors figured out that he was poisoned. Kira questions 3 people. All of them are Frank's roommates. Jeff says, "Today I've had dinner with my girlfriend. I only saw Frank in the morning, and he was feeling great." Thomas says, "We had breakfast with Frank in his room this morning. He was in a great mood." And Ellie says, "I've just returned. I had to buy gifts for my family, so I've been shopping all day." Who poisoned Frank? The screensaver is out of date. Frank left a hint with his enemy's name. It was Thomas. Kira, April, Mikkel, and Frank rent a cozy country house to celebrate Christmas. April bakes gingerbread men cookies and leaves them to cool down on the kitchen table. She hasn't applied the frosting yet. So, she asks the others to stay away from the cookies. April goes upstairs to change. In 10 minutes, she returns and sees that someone took a bit off every cookie. April gets furious. She asks the others, "What were you doing within the last 10 minutes?" Mikkel replies, "I was building a snowman outside. I have no idea what was going on in the house." Frank says, "I was decorating the Christmas tree with these balls." And Kira replies, "I was watching my favorite movie in the bedroom. It was so loud that I didn't hear anything." April already knows who's lying. What about you? Frank is lying. There's no balls on the tree. Santa comes home earlier and finds his elf Bobby on the sofa. He's bewitched by an eternal sleep spell. Santa asks the other elf, Chuck, a question.
"What happened here? Only you two were at home."
Chuck replies,
"We were packing the gifts and decided to have a lunch break. Suddenly, I heard a loud sound outdoors and ran out to see what was up. I spent about 20 minutes there, and then I returned back home. Bobby was already unconscious."
Santa calls Chuck a liar. Why? Chuck said he spent 20 minutes outdoors, but the coffee cups are still hot. He bewitched Bobby and staged the scene. Kira comes home to her family's house. She's looking forward to eating the walnut cookies she bought at the airport, but she has to eat them outside because her mother is allergic to all types of nuts. After a while, Kira looks inside her bag and sees that all the cookies are gone. Kira suspects her brothers, so she asks, "Who ate my cookies?" Dylan replies, "I was making apple pie with Mom." Paul says, "I was decorating the living room." Kevin says, "I was making a sandwich with peanut butter for Mom." And Ralph says, "I was just watching the TV and eating my popcorn." Now Kira knows who took her cookies. What about you? Kevin is lying. They have the same mother, and as we mentioned earlier, she's allergic to all nuts. During the family dinner, Dylan receives an email and begins to cry. Kira asks, "What's wrong?" Dylan replies, "I'm a beginner photographer, and I've sent my best picture to the photo contest. I was expecting to win the first prize, but they disqualified me. Can you figure out why just by looking at this picture?" The stars are over the moon. It's impossible. Kira is looking for her mother all over the house, but someone used black magic to turn her into a statue. There's a note nearby. It only has a question mark written with green pencil. Kira decides to question the Green family next door. Zelda says, "I was painting in the attic as usual." Oliver says, "I was cooking soup for my family." Mark says, I was looking for my missing cat downtown. And Wanda says,
I was playing video games in the basement and heard nothing.
who cursed Kira's mom? The clue literally says, "?Green."
A hat and scarf cost $110. The hat is $100 more expensive than the scarf. How much does the scarf cost? $5. It means that the hat is $105, which is exactly $100 more than the scarf. Mia was a shop assistant on a giant cruise liner. Once, she found an expensive watch in the boutique where she worked and announced it on the radio. Soon, 4 people showed up in the store. Each of them claimed it was their watch. Mia looked at all of them attentively and realized who the watch belonged to. Can you figure it out too? This man does have a watch tan line, but it's much bigger than the watch Mia found. This young girl already has a watch on her left hand. Why would she wear the second one? The elderly lady must be very absent-minded. Her dog is wearing her watch as a collar. The watch must belong to the teenager. Nick was an experienced skydiver, but one day, something went wrong. A strong gust of wind brought him to the forest. The man found himself among trees with no food or water. Soon, Nick saw 4 roads in front of him. One led to a supermassive black hole that swallowed everything that got close. The second road ended in a sea full of sharks. The third road led to a mountain that was impossible to climb over. And the fourth road ended in a bottomless abyss. Which road should Nick take? He should follow the third road. No one says he has to climb over the mountain. He can simply go around it. During which month do people sleep the least? During February. It only has 28, maximum 29 days. A man is on the run from the police after he stole 3 massive gold bars, 30 pounds each. At some point, he reaches a long bridge that can support only 260 pounds. The man weighs 200 pounds. How can he transport all 3 gold bars in one go? He has to walk across the bridge while juggling the bars. It means that at any time, only 2 bars will be on the bridge, since the third one will always be in the air. Look attentively at these 3 men carrying a log. One of them is cheating. Can you figure out who it is? It's the man in the middle. For one thing, he's wearing a suit, which is a strange choice of clothing for such a task. Plus, his face is quite relaxed, and his eyes are open. It doesn't look as if carrying the lug feels like hard work for him. One evening, Emma went to take out the trash from her coffee shop. She was about to leave when she spotted something dark in the corner behind the trash bins. It was a young woman, and she was unconscious. Emma rushed to her. The girl's bag and smartphone were lying nearby on the ground. The first person on the contact list was named Big Sis. Emma called the number and heard a female voice. "I found your sister lying on the ground. It seems someone hit her on the head."
What?
The woman was shocked and promised to come immediately. Next, Emma called the police. The sister and police officers arrived at the same time. "Arrest this woman. She's behind the attack."
Oh.
And Emma pointed at the sister. Why did she say so? She didn't tell the sister where to come. How did she know the address?
Oh.
There are 4 cups on the counter, all of them upturned and hiding the same number of sweets underneath. Near each of the cups, there is a sign that says how many sweets are under it. The signs are 5 or 6, 7 or 8, 6 or 7, and 7 or 5. Only one of these signs is correct. How many sweets are there under each cup? Since only one sign is correct, the right number can't appear twice. Otherwise, more than one sign will be correct. It means that there are 8 sweets under each cup. Luke took part in a scientific experiment, but something went terribly wrong. He ended up in a place where there was nothing but 3 portals. One of them led to a polar desert in Antarctica. The second one opened into a volcanic crater filled with molten lava. And behind the third portal, there was the age of dinosaurs, with huge diplodocuses roaming around. Which portal should the man choose? Luke would freeze in no time in a polar desert. Molten lava isn't even an option. But diplodocuses are totally harmless to people. They only eat plants. Look at the picture attentively and say which of these people is left-handed. It's the waiter. It's easier for a left-handed person to hold the tray in the right hand and deal with the food and drinks with the left, dominant hand. Detective Henry Taylor was getting ready for work when he heard screams from his neighbor's house. He rushed there. The door was locked. The man had to kick it several times before it opened. He found his neighbor, Miss Anderson, in the living room. She was tied to a chair. "Oh, I'm so happy you heard me shouting. An hour ago, a man knocked on my door and said he was an electrician. But as soon as I let him in, he tied me up and took all the priceless paintings I had got from my grandfather, and then he just ran away." Detective Taylor had to arrest the woman for staging the theft. How did he know? When he tried to get into the house, the door was latched from the inside. Who could do it if Miss Anderson was tied up and the thief supposedly ran out of the house in a hurry? You have 5 pieces of chain, and each of them is made up of 3 links. You have to make a long chain out of these 5 pieces. Welding an open link will cost you $3, and breaking a link open is $1. Can you make a long chain if you have only $15? First, take one piece of chain and break all of its 3 links open. It'll cost you $3. Then link the remaining 4 pieces of the chain with these open links. Welding these links will cost you another $9. In total, you'll only pay $12. In the middle of a long flight, 2 passengers stood up and started to threaten the crew and passengers. They demanded $1 million in a helicopter. One of the criminals had a pilot's license and could fly a copter. When the plane landed at the nearest airport, the passengers got everything they had requested: a case full of money and a helicopter. But when they got inside, they didn't manage to fly away and were captured by the police. Why couldn't they start the machine if the helicopter didn't have any technical problems? The helicopter was okay, but there was no fuel in its tank. Michael got lost when he was walking in the forest. After hours of wandering around, he finally saw a weird-looking house that seemed to be deserted. Still, the guy decided to try his luck and ask for directions. But when he entered the house, the door shut behind his back with a loud bang, and he heard a voice, "You've entered my home uninvited. You won't leave it easily."
Oh no.
After that, Michael found himself in a room with 3 doors. The voice told him that only one of those doors led to freedom. Behind the first door, there were starving wolves. The second door hid a furious werewolf. And behind the third door, there was a huge, raging campfire. Which door is safe? Michael should wait until the campfire goes out and get out of the house through the third door.
Rachel called the police early in the morning. When they arrived, she told the officers her story.
I work in a museum. Yesterday, I took home several ancient books. I wanted to do some research, but then a blackout happened. I lit a couple of candles and continued my work. Suddenly, I heard the doorbell ring. When I opened the door, someone in a black mask hit me on the head. When I recovered, the books were gone.
Detective Anderson arrested the woman for misreporting. Why? If there had been a blackout, the doorbell wouldn't have been working. After a bank had been robbed, the police found a bag with money in the park. It was lying among cacti. The police officers arrested 3 suspects. It didn't take long to figure out who the bank robber was. Do you know who it is? It's the man on the left. He's the only one with some scratches. They must have been left by the cacti. Detective Brown stopped a man leaving a clothing store.
The sales assistant claims you've stolen some expensive gloves.
"These are my gloves! I've had them for ages!" the man exclaimed. But the detective immediately understood the man was lying. How? The man wouldn't be able to use these gloves. They're both for the same hand. A family with 2 teenagers went on vacation to the seaside. They lived in a small bungalow, almost right on the beach. Everything was great at first, but 2 days after their arrival, their younger son went missing. The police had 4 suspects. They invited the guy's family to look at them. Maybe they could recognize someone. The teenager's mother didn't need more than a glance before she knew who was behind her son's disappearance. Who was it? It's the man wearing the missing guy's baseball cap. Michael was going home from the gym when everything went black. When the guy came around, he found out that he was in a locked room. Next to the door, there was a computer with a keyboard. On the screen, there was a riddle. Michael had to type the correct answer, and the door would open. The riddle went like this. It makes 2 people out of 1. What is it? Michael typed the correct word, and the door opened. He was free to go. What was the answer? It's a mirror. Police detective Thomas Davis was walking along the street on a winter evening. Suddenly, he saw a person in a black mask sneaking out of a house through the window. They were carrying 2 large bags. The detective realized it was a burglar. He ran after the stranger, but they turned the corner and disappeared. Thomas understood that the criminal had hidden in one of these houses. But which one? It can't be the house on the left. There are too many people inside. There are no footprints in the snow leading to the house on the right. It means no one has been there for quite some time, which leaves us with the house in the middle. Oliver was attacked in his apartment and taken to a hospital. The police had 4 suspects, all of them Oliver's neighbors. Amelia said she'd been walking in the park since early morning. Henry explained he'd been painting in his studio and had heard nothing. Jacob said he'd been repairing his car. Sophia answered she'd been taking a bath for the past 3 hours. Look at these people's hands and try to figure out who is lying. It's a bit strange that Jacob, who'd been repairing his car, and Henry, who'd been painting, both have such clean hands. But they could have been wearing gloves. At the same time, Sophia's hands and fingers aren't wrinkled. But it would be a natural skin reaction after 3 hours in a bathtub. How many bricks does it take to complete a building? Just 1. It will be the last one. A man wanted to buy a used car. He found a nice one, which cost $9,000. He bought it and didn't pay a dime for it. How come? When paying $9,000, you don't need to spend dimes. Now let's check your math skills. How can you write 45 using only the number 4? "44 plus 44 44ths." Nathan sneaked out of the house late in the evening to meet his girlfriend. The teenager thought he was extremely careful and quiet, but his whole family knew about his plan. They were aware that the guy would return at midnight. They decided to make a bet. The one who would see Nathan first when the guy started climbing the fence would be the winner. No chores for them for 1 week. Not to fall asleep, Nathan's dad switched on the TV. The teen's grandfather settled in the living room and started to read a book. The grandmother went to the kitchen to make pizza, and Nathan's mom went to her room, sat down on the floor, and started meditating. Who's going to be the first to spot Nathan when the time comes? Nathan's mom. Her eyes will be used to the darkness, and she will see better than the others. The CEO of a large company called the police. He was sure that one of his employees, Victoria, had stolen a memory card with secret information. She was going to sell it to the competitors. The police arrived at Victoria's house, but the woman didn't let them in without a warrant. The officers had to leave to get all the necessary papers. When they came back, Victoria was already sitting in her car, ready to drive off. The police officers arrested the woman. They searched her car and clothes, but found nothing. And then, when they were about to give up, one of the detectives realized where Victoria kept the memory card. Can you figure it out? When the police first came to her, the woman had her hair down, but after that, Victoria changed her hairstyle. The memory card is in her bun. Martin was driving past a bus stop when he saw 3 people standing there. One of them was Monica, a woman he had a crush on. Martin also spotted Sam, his friend, and an elderly lady who looked like she was freezing. Unfortunately, Martin had a 2-seater car. What should he do? He should let Sam borrow his car and stay at the bus stop with the girl he likes. This way, Sam will be able to give a lift to the elderly woman, and Martin will have more time to get to know Monica better. During a fire, a bank was robbed. The security guard told the police he wanted to save a bag with money, but he had to lace up his boot right in front of the emergency kit. At that moment, the door opened and hit him on the head. When he recovered, the money was missing. Why was the security guard arrested? All emergency doors open outward. Detective Adams came to the park to have lunch in the sun, but his attention was drawn by 3 men running around a fountain. Each of them was shouting, "Thief! Catch the thief!" The detective was confused. Who was the real thief? That's why he just kept watching. After some time, the distance between the men shortened. Detective Adams immediately realized who the real thief was. Can you figure it out too? If the third man was the thief, the second one would only have to turn around to catch him. The same goes for the second man, which means the man running in first is the criminal. Someone robbed a bank in a large city. A police detective went to visit the main suspect. "I've been feeling unwell all this week, and I haven't left my apartment for 3 days. I didn't even need food. My fridge is full. You can make sure yourself," the suspect said, and indeed opened his fridge. But the detective realized the man was lying and arrested him. How did he figure it out? First of all, the bread on the table looks fresh. Plus, if the man had been staying inside for 3 days already, his fridge wouldn't be that full.
In Imagine that you're on a game show, and here's your last task. There are 3 doors in front of you. Behind one of them there is a car. Behind the other 2 there are ghosts. You pick a door to open. Let's say the first door. The host of the show, who knows behind which door the car is, opens another door. Let's say it's door 3. Behind it there is a goat. After that, the game host tells you, now your final choice. Do you want to switch your choice of doors? Do you think it would be in your interest to change your choice and pick door 2 instead? I'll give you some time to think, and you make your decision. Have you made your choice? This problem is called a Monty Hall problem. There is named after the host of a game show where this situation happened. And here what PhDs and mathematicians say. Switching the door doesn't make any sense. When you picked it first, the chances of picking the door with the car were 1/3. Whatever door you choose, the chances are the same. After the host opened the door, the odds of picking the door with the car are 50-50. But when Marilyn Savant, the most intelligent woman on the planet with an IQ of 228, was asked this question in her Sunday column in 1990, she replied, "Yes, you should switch. The first door has 1/3 chance of winning, but the second door has a 2/3 chance." Her response caused a huge outburst of negative comments. Mrs. Vusava received thousands of angry letters, 90% of which were telling her how wrong she was and how she lacked basic mathematical knowledge. Many of those letters were from mathematicians and PhDs. Marilyn wrote a response to them defending her answer. The winning odds of 1/3 of the first choice can't go up to 1/2. If you are still not persuaded and think that probabilities change after the second door is open, let's just consider all possible scenarios. There are 3 doors, and the car can be behind each one of them with equal possibility. So 3 scenarios are equally likely. The car is behind the first door, the car is behind the second door, and the car is behind the third door. Now let's say there are 2 players. One is a switcher, the one who will switch the door after the door with the goat is open. The other one is a non-switcher, the one who will stick to the first choice. Now let's see what happens in each case. Let's say the car is behind the first door. Both people choose the first door. The host opens either one of the remaining 2 doors. It doesn't matter which one, because there are goats behind both. The switcher will now switch to the other door, and the non-switcher will stick to the first one. In this case, the non-switcher will get the car. Professors 1, Marilyn 0. But let's consider the other 2 scenarios. Now the car is behind the second door. Once again, both players pick the first door. The host opens the third door, the one with the goat. The first player switches his choice and wins, and the second player sticks to the first one and loses. 1-1. The last case is when the car is behind the third door. The players pick the first door. This time the host opens the second door, because the second goat is there. The first player switches to the third door and wins. The second player sticks to the first door and loses. So the non-switching players win only one time, in the scenario when they pick the right door right away, which happens in 1/3 of cases. The switchers lose in only that one scenario, when they pick the right door right away and then give it up later. But they win in the other 2 scenarios, in both cases when the car is behind one of the other 2 doors. Mrs. Vusavant suggested another brilliant way to modify the problem to make it even clearer. Imagine that there are not 3 doors, but 1,000,000. The car is behind one of them, and you have to make your choice. Say you pick the first door. Then the host opens all the doors except door number 777,777. All of them had goats, so the car is either behind the door you picked or behind the door number 777,777. Will you switch? Of course you will. When you picked the door for the first time, the odds to pick the right one were 1 in 1,000,000. Now, when you make another choice between doors 1 and 777,777, your door still has the odds of 1 in a million, but door number 777,777 has accumulated the odds of all the other doors that were open. The case with 3 doors is the same, but less obvious. But who is this brilliant woman who made a monkey out of most professors across the country? Marilyn Savant was born on 11th of August in 1946 in Missouri. She has her mother's last name and, interestingly, Savant means a person of learning in French. Marilyn is a descendant of the famous physicist Ernst Mach. She took her first IQ test when she was 10 years old and she scored 228. Just for comparison, on average, an adult has an IQ of 100. Her parents knew of the girl's exceptional intelligence, but they kept it a secret from the public so that the girl could live a normal life. The girl's dream was to become a writer. As a teenager, she was writing for local newspapers using pseudonyms. She wanted to become a full-time writer, but to do this, she needed financial security. Young Marilyn dropped out of college after 2 years because she got bored and started to invest. Within 5 years, her investments started to support her enough to let her fully dedicate herself to writing. In 1985, the Guinness Book of World Records obtained Marilyn's IQ scores from the Mega Society, a society of people with 1 in a million intelligence scores. They published them, and it made Marilyn Savant famous. She received a lot of media attention. A Parade magazine wrote an article about her, and it was so popular that they offered her to write her own column. Of course, Marilyn used this chance. She started the column Ask Marilyn, where she was answering tricky questions, solving riddles, and publishing her own. This is exactly where she gave her famous answer to the Monty Hall problem. But it wasn't the only controversial problem she solved. Here is one more. A shopkeeper says that she has 2 new beagles, but she doesn't know if they're male or female. You only want a male, so she calls a fellow who is bathing them. Turns out that at least one of them is a male. What is the probability that the other one is a male too? I'll give you some time to think. Here is what most people think. There are 3 possible scenarios. The 2 beagles are 2 males, 2 females, or a male and a female. Since one of them is a male, then it's now 2 possible options, 2 males or a pair. Therefore, the probability of 2 males is 1 second. Still, Marilyn Savant replied, 1 out of 3. This baffled the audience. But the key is that 2 puppies are different, and it's important to differentiate between them. For example, there is a puppy A and a puppy B. Now, how many combinations are there? Both being females is 1, both being males is 2. Now A is male and B is female, 3. And lastly, A is a female and B is a male, 4. So, there are 3 different cases when at least one is a male. So, when we know that at least one is a male, getting both males has the probability of 1/3. In over 35 years of solving thousands of riddles from her readers, Mrs. Savant only made 2 mistakes and she described them in her column. Now, Mrs. Savant is 76 years old, and she's still writing her Ask Marilyn column, so you can even check it out.
Katie and John went on vacation together to an exotic location. In their first week, they booked a tour to the desert. But during the tour, the couple got lost. They were really thirsty, so they decided to go look for some water. Soon enough, the couple came across a huge oasis. But to reach the main waterfall where they could drink some water, they had to cross a bridge. But there were 3 bridges leading to the same place. The first bridge was high above the ground, and the ropes holding it looked as if they could rip at any second. The second bridge had some hungry-looking alligators crawling all over it, and the last bridge stretched over a lake full of poisonous water plants. Which bridge should they choose? The last one. The bridge stands high above the lake. Katie and Jake won't have to touch the water and the plants when crossing it. Luckily, they had radios with them, so they sent an SOS signal to their guide. The guide told them to sit tight. He promised the guys that a rescue team would be shortly on its way to help them. In a few hours, 3 rescue teams reached Katie and John. The guys got suspicious and asked the members of the team who had sent them. The first team said that they'd heard on the radio that a couple had gotten lost in the desert and had come to help them. The members of the second team explained that the hotel the guys were staying at had called the police for help. The last team said they'd received a radio signal saying the couple had been in distress. They immediately came to the rescue. Which team should the couple trust? The last team. John and Katie sent a message to their guide as soon as they got lost, remember? Back in the hotel room, John and Katie found out that someone had broken into their safe. The couple called the police and told the inspector that a few $100s and an expensive watch had been stolen from the safe. In less than a day, the inspector had 3 suspects. The first suspect was Bella, their tour guide. Bella said she'd been really worried about the couple's disappearance and hadn't left her room. The second suspect was Claudio, the hotel manager. He told the inspector that he hadn't even known that the couple had been missing. He was sure they'd been staying in their room this whole time. The last suspect was Bob from the rescue team. He told the inspector it wasn't him. It was the first time he had set foot in the hotel. Who is lying? Claudio. Look at his wrist. He's wearing a very expensive watch that looks exactly like the watch that was stolen. Plus, look at his pocket. He didn't do a good job at hiding the stash of money he'd stolen. After the crime was solved, John and Katie decided it was time to head home. As soon as they arrived at their house, they tried to open the new suitcase they had bought during the trip. They tried several number combinations but couldn't figure out the code. Luckily, Katie remembered she had saved a note on her cell phone. This was the tip she wrote down. 682. One digit is right and in its place. 614. One digit is right, but in the wrong place. 206. 2 digits are right, but both are in the wrong place. 768. All digits are wrong. 380. One digit is right, but in the wrong place. Can you figure out what the 3-digit code to open their suitcase is? (042). The following weekend, Katie's friends invited her to a picnic in the forest. But when she arrived at the agreed place, she didn't see any of her girlfriends. Instead, she saw a large group of people standing in a wide clearing. Apparently, she had come to the wrong location. But right before she left, she noticed that 3 of these people weren't human. Can you spot them? Look at the way that girl over there blinks. This doesn't look normal, does it? And look at that granny's cane. It's part of her body, not a separate object. And that guy is charging his phone using a cable connected to his leg. Yikes! On a rainy Saturday night, John and Katie decided to stay in, order pizza, and watch the Riddle channel on TV. On the screen, there were 2 women. The first one was stuck inside a cage hanging above the ocean, filled with sharks. The other woman was tied with a rope, hanging over a lake with piranhas. Both ropes were about to break. Who has the best chance of surviving? It's lady number 2. The first lady is stuck inside a cage, so she has no way to escape. If she falls into the water, she will most likely not survive. But lady number 2 has both her hands free, so she can try to climb the rope before it tears. The next morning, John went to work. As soon as he arrived at the office, he saw that his colleague Susan was very upset. She said that at one point she had gone to the bathroom, but when she came back, she discovered that someone had stolen her pearl earrings she had kept inside her drawer. John promptly undertook an investigation. The first suspect was Gertrude, a saleswoman. She said she was in a meeting with the CEO and nowhere near Susan's famous pearl earrings. The second suspect was Britt, an IT guy. He said he'd been fixing the company's software all morning. And lastly, John questioned Brian, the CEO, who said he had spent the morning at his daughter's ballet recital. Can you tell who's lying? It was Gertrude. Gertrude's account contradicts the CEO's statement. And plus, look at those pearl earrings she has in her desk drawer. They look somewhat familiar, no? John went back to his desk and started working. Later that evening, a massive power outage made all the lights in the building go out. John heard footsteps approaching him. The next thing he knew, he felt dizzy. He passed out and woke up in a tiny room with a metal door. John tried to open the door, but it was locked. He noticed that next to the door, there was a little device with a red sign that asked for a password. Below the device, there was a piece of paper with the following hint: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. John read the note aloud several times before he finally figured out what the password was. Can you guess what password he typed? He typed in 1 time the number 2, 3 times the number 4, 5 times the number 6, and 7 times the number 8. Phew, that wasn't very obvious, was it? One afternoon, John was walking down the street when he came across a dog. The dog had a collar with its name on it, and a part of its leash was still attached to the collar. It looked like the dog had just run away, so John picked it up and started searching for its owner. He walked into a pet store, and there were 3 people standing near the counter. John took a quick look around and knew immediately who the owner was. How did he figure it out? Look at the guy in the middle. A ripped leash is hanging out of his pocket. He must be the dog's owner. On a beautiful morning, Katie and her friend went on a hike. At some point, they saw a river they needed to cross. Both of them needed to get to the other side. However, the boat could only make one trip back and forth and take one of them at a time. Still, both of them managed to get across the river. How? That's easy. They both went on a hike on the same day, but they weren't together, so they arrived at the river at the same time. But they were on the opposite banks, and after Katie arrived at the other side of the river, her friend managed to get to the opposite bank too.
Now, Foggy is a friendly ghost living in the attic of an old house. Every night, he goes for a refreshing walk around the house for 4 hours. Foggy doesn't like 1 month of the year because that month he gets to walk around way less than the previous months. What's the month and why? It's February. There are just 28 days and nights in February, and 29 on the luckiest years. So, fewer nights and less time for Foggy to walk around. Just a month ago, Autumn and her family moved into a new house. Everyone loved it, but Autumn was sure that the house was haunted. She doesn't know it yet, but our old friend Foggy is the ghost that lives in her attic. He is a friendly ghost, so once he left her a message written on a mirror. Autumn woke up and saw this. Can you help her read the message? It's a code. Autumn should ignore the numbers and only look at the letters. The note says, "Do not be afraid. I am Foggy. And who are you?" Right before Halloween, when everyone was dressed up and carefree, all the creatures flooded a little town trying to blend in. Detective Callum was on duty to identify all the imposters and keep an eye on them. He has a couple of leads, and your task is to help him find all the monsters. Deal? The first one we need to find is a vampire. The vampire lives in one of these 2 houses. Can you tell which one? Look, there is garlic hanging in this house. Vampires can't stand garlic. They prefer cilantro, so it cannot be a vampire's house. So the vampire lives in this one. Perfect. Let's move on. One of these houses belongs to a centaur. Do you have any idea which one? It must be this one. Pay closer attention to the path to the house. There are footprints of horse hooves. Centaurs have an upper body of a human, but a lower body of a horse, which explains the prints. The centaurs must be living here. The next one we need to track is a mummy. Take a closer look at these two apartments. Where does the mummy reside? Now, did you notice the bandages all over the room here? It must belong to the mummy, so I bet that's his place. Now it's time to track the Cyclops. Keep your eye out and make your best guess. Did you notice this strange object in this room? It looks like a pair of glasses, but it only has one lens. Well, that's because it belongs to a Cyclops. They only have one eye. So that must be his place. Okay, we only have one last creature to identify, a gnome. Here are two apartments. Which one does the gnome live in? Did you notice that the mirror in this apartment hangs a bit too low? That's because gnomes are short. He must be living here. Other creatures that have flooded the town are robots. For Halloween, some people started to dress up like them, too. Look at these three people. Can you find the fake robot? Look at their footprints. The robot on the left has human footprints in the beginning that only later change into tire patterns. He must be the fake robot. Let's train your eyes a bit. Here are Halloween emojis. All of them but one has a pair. Can you find the one that doesn't have a pair? Great job! Here it is. Okay, one more time. Now there are even more emojis. Do you see the unique one? Here it is. Good! Now let's proceed. A month before Halloween, Daphne moved into a new modern house that was built in the early 2000s. It was a great house, but Daphne got it for a very low price because it was believed to be haunted. The girl didn't believe in that, so it didn't bother her one bit. On Halloween night, she returned home after midnight. When she walked into her room, she saw a ghost floating there. The ghost looked at Daphne and said, "You know what? You can't live here. It's my house. I've lived here for 100 years, and you're making me uncomfortable." Daphne said that the ghost was lying. Why? The house was built in the early 2000s, so it's barely 20 years old. The ghost couldn't have lived there for 100 years. That's right, ghosts lie. It is Halloween night, full moon, all the creepy things, but Eslyn went to an abandoned spooky house in the woods alone. As soon as she walked in, the door behind her got shut and locked. She wandered around the house and found 3 doors leading out, but they didn't seem safe. Behind the first door, there was a werewolf. Behind the second door, there was a zombie. Behind the third door, there was a ghost. Which way is safer for her to choose? Eslyn should definitely choose the third door. Ghosts may be spooky, but they can't do her any real harm. Of course, Eslyn wasn't the only one who went to the house that night. Another student, Colton, dressed in the silver armor of a knight, decided to explore the spooky house too. Just like with Eslyn, the door got shut behind him right after he stepped into the house. He found 3 ways out too. Behind the first door, there was a vampire. Behind the second door, there was a huge dragon who hates strangers. Behind the third door, there was a huge cyclops that would crash anyone who walks in. Which way should Colton choose to stay safe? Luckily for him, he is dressed as a knight in silver armor. Vampires are afraid of silver, so the first way is totally safe for Colton. On Halloween night, Kennedy wanted to spend the evening with her boyfriend, but her dad was against her dating anyone. To go around it, she lied that she was going to trick-or-treat with her friends and promised to be home by midnight. She returned at 11:30 p.m. Yet her dad got mad at her and demanded to tell him where she really was. Wow. How did he understand that Kennedy didn't go trick-or-treating? She returned with an empty candy basket. Outside of town, hidden in the woods, there is a house where a group of friends live. A mummy, a mermaid, a ghost, a werewolf, and a witch. Every Halloween, they eat candy. There are 5 creatures, but this year they only have 4 chocolate bars, and they don't know how to split them equally. Maybe you have an idea? They should split each one of the 4 bars into 5 pieces, and then each creature gets a piece from each bar. This way, everyone will eat exactly 4 pieces of chocolate. Now that monsters and humans live next to each other, let's try to identify who is who. I will be showing you photos, and your task is to find a monster in each photo. Here's the first one. Can you find the monster? Look, this guy's skin is green. He's definitely not a human. Here is the next photo for you. Be attentive. Do you see someone who is not a human here? This girl in the swimming pool is a mermaid. Good job. Okay, here's one more. It's quite hard, but I believe in you. Who do you think is not a human here? Look, this woman doesn't cast a shadow. Now this is not normal for a human being, so she must be some other creature. Great job! Here's another one for you. Which one do you bet isn't a human? This person is carrying a wand. She must be a witch. This is probably the hardest one. You have to keep your eyes wide open. A photo of a local cafe. Do you see something suspicious? Look, there's a glass of blood in the air, as if someone's drinking it. It must be the vampire who's drinking it, but the vampire isn't in the photo because they can't be photographed. Technicalities.